Would you judge a man by his clothes? This manager did, and it cost him everything. The showroom gleamed like a palace, spotless white marble floors, stretching as far as the eye could see, glass walls reflecting the dazzling lights above, and rows of sleek high-end sports cars lined up like untouchable works of art. The kind of place where millionaires came to spend absurd amounts of money just because they could. And then there was him. Malcolm pushed open the heavy glass door. His entrance met with an almost instant shift in the atmosphere. His boots, caked in dried mud from hours tending his farm, left faint traces on the immaculate floor. His flannel shirt, sweat stained from the afternoon sun, looked completely out of place among the showroom's polished sophistication. His jeans, frayed at the knees, had seen years of hard work. The scent of leather and cologne filled the air. But Malcolm carried something different. The faint smell of fresh soil and country air. It was as if the world outside had no place here. A few salesmen stole quick glances before returning to their conversations. A couple browsing an electric blue sports car turned their heads, their eyes scanning him before whispering among themselves. And then there was Brad Simmons. The showroom manager had been standing by the front desk laughing at something on his phone. But the second Malcolm stepped in, his expression changed. His jaw stiffened, his lips pressed into a thin line. His eyes scanned Malcolm, like he was an intruder in a place he didn't belong. Malcolm barely had time to take a few steps before Brad moved in, cutting him off. "Sir Brad," said, his voice dripping with forced politeness. "Can I help you with something?" Malcolm, unfazed, glanced around the showroom. "Yeah, I was hoping to take a look at the new limited edition model. I heard you had one in stock." Brad let out a short, almost amused breath. He looked Malcolm up and down, taking in the dirt-streaked clothes. The rough hands, the faded cap. "We don't exactly do test drives for just anyone," Brad said, tilting his head slightly. "This isn't the kind of place where you, just browse." Malcolm's brow lifted slightly, so Brad folded his arms, his smirk widening. "Maybe you'd have better luck at one of the dealerships across town. They've got a solid selection of used trucks." But before Malcolm could say a word, someone else stepped through the door. The glass door swung open with a quiet hiss, and a rush of cool air followed. But Brad didn't bother turning around. His focus was still locked on Malcolm, as if making sure he didn't take another step deeper into his showroom. Malcolm exhaled slowly, his patience stretching thin. He had spent years dealing with men like Brad, different faces, same attitude. He had half a mind to turn around and leave, but something inside him told him to stay. "I'm not looking for a used truck," Malcolm said, his voice steady. "I came here for a reason." Brad chuckled under his breath, shaking his head like he'd heard this before. "Sir, this is a luxury dealership. Our clientele is selective." He emphasized the last word, letting it linger between them a few feet away. A younger salesman, mid-20s, sharp suit, nervous energy shifted uncomfortably. Overhearing the exchange, he glanced between Malcolm and Brad, as if debating whether to intervene, but he said nothing. Malcolm adjusted his cap, meeting Brad's gaze, head on selective. "Huh." Brad's smirk didn't waver. "That's right, the T." Tension thickened, stretching across the showroom like an invisible rope pulling tighter. A woman inspecting a silver sports car with her husband shot a sideways glance at them before looking away, quickly pretending not to notice. Malcolm sighed, stuffing his calloused hands into his pockets. "You know," he said, shaking his head slightly, "I've worked hard my whole life, built something from the ground up, and the funny thing about money, it doesn't always dress the way you expect it." To Brad's expression barely flickered. If anything, he looked more entertained. "I'm sure that's true," he said, voice laced with condescension. "But our customers don't usually track dirt into the showroom." His eyes dropped to Malcolm's boots again, then flicked back up. "So unless you were here for something realistic," he gestured lazily toward the exit. "I don't want to waste your time." The younger salesman shifted again. This time he opened his mouth, but Brad shot him a look that shut him down before he could speak. Malcolm let out a short laugh, low, and knowing he had expected this, it wasn't the first time. It probably wouldn't be the last. But before he could respond, a voice cut through the space behind them. "Hey, Dad. Sorry I took so long." Brad froze, mid-expression slowly. He turned his head toward the voice. The man who had just walked in was polished. Perfection, tailored navy suit. Crisp white shirt, sleek designer watch that caught the light just right. He moved with an effortless confidence, the kind that made people step aside without him asking. Jared Malcolm gave a small nod, his face unreadable. "You're late," Jared chuckled, walking toward him. "Yeah, got caught up with some last-minute calls." He clapped Malcolm on the shoulder, company. Completely at ease, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then his sharp gaze flicked toward Brad, and the shift in the room was instantaneous. The tension snapped, replaced by something else entirely: panic. Brad blinked rapidly, mouth slightly open as his brain scrambled to make sense of what was happening. His eyes darted between Malcolm and Jared, as if searching for a mistake. A misunderstanding. Malcolm, the man he had just dismissed as some broke farmer who wandered in by accident. He was Jared's father. Jared frowned slightly, looking from Brad to Malcolm. "I see you already met my dad." His voice was casual, but there was a dangerous edge creeping in. Brad opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The younger salesman, who had been watching with growing discomfort, suddenly found a reason to check something on his clipboard, avoiding eye contact entirely. A deep silence settled over the showroom, stretching unbearably. A few customers, sensing something big was happening, subtly repositioned themselves to listen in. Brad finally found his voice, but it came out weak. "I didn't realize." Jared tilted his head slightly. "Didn't realize what exactly?" Brad swallowed hard. I didn't know he was." Jared cut him off rich. His tone was cold. Now Brad flinched. Malcolm stayed silent, watching Jared step closer to Brad, his expression unreadable. "So let me get this straight," he said slowly, like he was piecing it together in real time. "You saw a black man walk in here wearing work clothes, and instead of treating him like a paying customer, you decided he didn't belong." Brad opened his mouth again, then shut it just as quickly. His carefully polished confidence had completely crumbled. Jared let the silence drag, then he turned to his father. "Did he even let you see the car?" Malcolm shook his head. "Didn't get that far." Jared exhaled sharply, looking back at Brad with something bordering disgust. "This is interesting," he said, "because I was planning on buying 3 cars today." Cash. A soft gasp came from someone in the background. Even the other employees, who had been pretending not to notice, stiffened. Brad's face drained of color. Jared adjusted, his cuff eyes locked onto Brad's. "But now I think I'll take my business somewhere else." Brad physically jolted, like someone had kicked the back of his knees. "Wait, Mr. Carter." Jared held up a hand, stopping him cold. "No, you had your chance." Brad looked around as if searching for someone to save him, but the younger salesman had suddenly become very busy inspecting a car's price tag, and the other employees, they knew better than to get involved. Malcolm smirked, slightly adjusting his cap. "Guess what? Get those cars somewhere else, huh?" Jared turned to him. "Yeah, somewhere that actually deserves our money." Then together they turned and headed for the door. But Brad wasn't done yet. Brad's breath hitched as Malcolm and Jared walked toward the door. His mind raced. He had to fix this fast. "Wait," he blurted, stepping forward. "Mr. Carter, please let us talk about this." His voice had shifted, completely gone was the smug arrogance. Now it was all desperation. Jared didn't even slow down. Malcolm, however, paused just before reaching the exit. He turned slightly, lifting an eyebrow. "Talk about what exactly?" Brad hurried to close the gap between them, forcing an awkward, ingratiating smile. "This was a misunderstanding," he said, voice suddenly coated in fake warmth. "I had no idea you were a family." Jared scoffed. "Shh." Aching his head. "Family." He turned to face Brad fully, now crossing his arms. "So if he wasn't my father, you'd still be throwing him out?" Brad froze. Jared let the silence drag. "See, that's the problem." Jared continued, stepping closer. "You don't treat people with respect. You treat money with respect. ECT. And if you don't see money on someone, you act like they don't matter." Brad's face turned red, his fingers twitching at his sides. "That's not what I meant." Jared wasn't interested in excuses. "So tell me, Brad, how long have you been doing this? How many people have you turned away just because they didn't look rich enough. Brad opened his mouth, then shut it. The air in the showroom was thick. Employees stopped pretending to work. Customers stood still, some pretending to scroll through their phones. While eavesdropping, Malcolm watched Brad, carefully taking in the panic settling behind his eyes. He had seen this kind of man before, one who played gatekeeper, deciding who was worthy and who wasn't. He shook his head. "You know," Malcolm said, voice calm but firm, "I've been in places like this before, walked into restaurants, hotels, dealership. I've seen that same look you gave me 100 times. He let the words settle before adding, "It's funny though, the same people who turn their nose up at me always change their tune once they realize what's in my bank account." Brad swallowed, sweat gathering at his temple. Jared took another step forward, lowering his voice just enough to make the moment sting. "Here's what's going to happen, Brad," he said. "You're going to watch us walk out that door, and you're going to remember this moment. The next time you judge someone by their clothes instead of their character." Brad's eyes flicked to moo. "Malcolm pleading, sir. Please, But Malcolm had already turned away, and just like that, the biggest sale of Brad's career walked right out the door. But the consequences were just getting started. The heavy glass door swung shut behind Malcolm and Jared, leaving behind a silence so thick it might as well have been concrete inside the showroom. Brad stood frozen, his face still twisted in an awkward half-smile, half-grimace, like his brain hadn't caught up to what had just happened. The younger salesman, who had been watching everything unfold with barely concealed discomfort, finally exhaled and muttered under his breath, "Wow." A few other employees exchanged glances. They had seen Brad act this way before. Maybe not this blatantly, but the arrogance, the subtle exclusions, the way he catered to certain customers while dismissing others. It wasn't new. But this time he had embarrassed himself publicly, and worse, he had just lost the kind of sale that could have earned them all serious commissions. A woman who had been eyeing a sleek red convertible turned to her husband and whispered, "Did that just happen?" The man, still staring at the exit, shook his head. "Yeah, and I don't think I want to buy from here anymore." Brad finally snapped out of it. His head whipped toward the younger salesman. "Why didn't you say something?" he hissed, like this was somehow someone else's fault. The younger man blinked. "What was I supposed to do, tell you not to be a jerk?" Brad's jaw clenched. He turned toward the front desk, reaching for his phone. He had to fix this. He'd call Jared Carter's office, apologize, offer a discount, something. But before he could even unlock the screen, the dealership's regional manager, Mr. Langford, walked in. And from the look on his face, he had seen everything. Brad stiffened, his stomach twisting into knots. "Sir," Langford held up a hand. "Save it," he said, "my office." Now Brad's stomach plummeted as Langford turned and walked toward his office. Every single pair of eyes in the showroom stayed locked on Brad. The customers, the salespeople, even the receptionist had stopped typing. Brad swallowed hard. He had been in this industry long enough to know he wasn't walking out of that office with his job. But what about Malcolm and Jared? Their day wasn't over yet. Outside, Malcolm and Jared stepped into the afternoon sun, the tension from inside the showroom rolling off their shoulders like dust shaken from old boots. Jared pulled out his keys, unlocking the doors to his sleek black SUV. He paused, glancing at his father. "You all right?" Malcolm let out a slow breath, then smirked. "You know I've been disrespected before," he said. But watching that man's face when he realized who I was, that was something else. Jared chuckled, shaking his head. "You handled that better than I would have." Malcolm tilted his head. "Oh, I don't know. You did pretty well putting him in his place." He slid into the passenger seat, adjusting his cap. "I'm guessing he won't be working there much longer." Jared started the engine, the soft hum of the car filling the silence. That's not really the point, though. He said, "Firing one guy doesn't fix the problem. There's 100% more." Just like him thinking they can size people up based on their clothes, their accent, their skin. Malcolm nodded, slowly rubbing his palms together. "Yeah, but people like that, they always show themselves. The world has a way of humbling a man who thinks he's above others." Jared pulled out of the parking lot, his grip firm on the wheel. "Still, I don't like seeing you treated that way. Malcolm gave him a knowing glance. Son, I've been treated that way long before you were even born. Jared exhaled sharply. He hated that, hated how normal this was for his father. They drove in silence for a moment, the city rolling past in a blur. Then Malcolm spoke again. You know what the best part of today was? Jared arched eyebrow, what Malcolm smirked, watching him beg. Jared burst out laughing. All right, that was satisfying. Malcolm chuckled too, shaking his head. But listen, he said, growing serious. You handled that the right way. You let him dig his own grave. Then you buried him with his own words. You didn't yell, didn't lose your temper. You let the truth speak for itself. Jar nodded, letting the words sink in after a beat. Malcolm added, that's how you really teach people a lesson, not by arguing, by making them face the weight of their own mistakes. Jared thought about that as they turned onto the highway. So where to now? Malcolm grinned, stretching out his legs someplace where the salesmen actually know how to do their jobs. Jared chuckled. You got it, old man. As they drove off, the luxury dealership faded into the distance. Just another place that lost more than just money that day. Because respect, that's something money can't buy. Have you ever been judged by your appearance before people even knew who you were, or seen someone else get treated unfairly just because they didn't look the part? It happens more than we think. And the only way to change it is to call it out when we see it. Treat people with respect, not because of what they have, but because of who they are. If this story made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Let's keep the conversation going, because at the end of the day, character matters more than status.